So today I'm going to look at this thin client made by Wyse. This is the RXOL model. A thin client is essentially a limited computer that boots off of a server. In this case it's a Citrix-based server, but you know, there's variations of it. And if I adjust my monitor and move the camera, you can see that it does in fact start up. I was trying some default passwords, nothing worked. And I'm just going to reboot and we're going to go into the BIOS. So actually let me just keep it on this and cut the power, start it up again. This particular one has a relatively modern architecture in it. It's got a more modern AMD chip in it. It's very stripped down though. It's like 128 megabytes of flash storage. But here's a little startup and password, and according to the internet it's Fireport with a capital F, and it works. So here we've got the BIOS. It's basic BIOS, nothing too special. Shows the 128 meg parallel ATA floppy or flash disk, and we've just got some basic USB stuff, boot order, blah 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 blah. Alright, that's enough fooling around with the software. Front of the unit just has a little logo, a power switch. I think this is an activity LED because there's also an LED behind the power switch. 2 USB ports, space for either a speaker or maybe a vent. On the bottom, it has these legs which are attached to it using little screws. Get these off since they're just going to get in the way. Rather long screws. Yeah, just a plastic set of feet. And here's the back. We've got 2 serial ports, possibly a covered up Wi-Fi antenna spot. Don't know. 2 PS2 ports, 2 DVI ports, audio in and out, 4 USB ports, Ethernet, 19 volt in, and a locking port. If you look closely, the DVI ports are different. That's because this one has analog, where this one does not. This is only for digital output. A lot of adapters, while all VGA adapters are the analog type, you can see it's got that extra pin, so therefore it won't plug into this guy, but it will plug into this guy. The power adapter seems like it's a very robust one, made by Asian Power Devices Incorporated. I'm not going to open it up. It's one of those heat sealed ones, and you know, it feels decent. It's listed, and you know, it's 19 volts at 3.42 amps. So yeah, I'll hang on to that because they're always useful. It uses a Mickey Mouse style power connector. There you go, and which means it's grounded. So let's get into this guy. The back of this also has this little slide out card with information like the model number and the serial number. I guess this is for when you're deploying them. The top just has some thermal transfer pads. Well, it's still better than thermal paste, I guess. These are just here to provide contact between heat sinks and other metal components to the top of the case to transfer heat away, because this entire side panel of the case, which is thick plastic and a decent amount of metal with some RF shielding and whatnot, is essentially the big heat sink, and it's providing all of the heat dissipation for the unit, because this is not actively cooled from what I can tell. I popped off the little side pieces of plastic as well, and we can see the basic architecture of the unit with most likely, well, this could either be the platform controller hub or maybe the graphics chip, because it looks like there may be 2 chips under here. Perhaps either the North Bridge and the CPU, or the CPU and the graphics controller. I don't know. I imagine the graphics controller is integrated into the North Bridge on this one. Some system memory, bit of power supply stuff. Here's the disk on module and an expansion slot, which looks like a PCI 1X, but who knows. Serial ATA, and the little battery backup and some unknown connector. We've got the speaker at the front and the little front panel board. I'm going to try and get this whole thing out. With all the boards removed, you can see that there's this tiny 6 ohm 1 watt speaker in the front, and the front panel has these interesting angled light pipes for the power button. This one just comes through straight for the little activity LED. This is a little daughter board with the USB ports on it, the front one, so it's upside down. All the letters are going to fall out, and it just has like a bypass cap or whatever on it. Nothing. Oh, version 1.02. Alright. And it says Mercury. Is that the code name? Maybe. And interestingly enough, there's a separate grounding wire on this. Oh, probably a guard wire for the cable. And the other board in here is just the power board, or power switch board with a pair of LEDs on it. Doesn't really explain what they're for, but this is a bicolor one and this is just a blue one. So this might be like an air light or something. And they just use these little multi-way connectors. Both of these boards use essentially the same connector. And again, the bottom of the chassis is all metal, and it's, you know, it's light, but it's still got some weight to it. It doesn't feel like it's got like aluminum foil on it. Okay, getting a look at the motherboard. Let's take a look at the memory stick. We've got half a gig of DDR2 5300. Nothing special there. And the heatsink has 6 screws on it. Let's see if we can just get all this off. It's a copper base with aluminum fins, so it's cheap but not super cheap. Got some of that thermal compound on me. I'll never get that off. These are actually held in with Loctite, which is a nice addition. I don't see that too often. Not sure the year this was made exactly. I'm sure we'll find some evidence as we dig into it though. I mean, it's essentially, you can kind of think of it as a netbook in a desktop case. I mean, it's essentially what they are. Okay, so it's coming off no problem. More of the thermal transfer pads instead of actual paste, which, you know, I don't mind. It's not as good, like in terms of thermal efficiency, but it's a lot easier to clean up, see? That's a closer look at the heat sink, and it's super thin copper and super thin aluminum. It's very, very light, this whole thing. I mean, it's nice that they're actually using copper, but yeah, it's so thin that I guess that's solder. I was thinking maybe it's actually scraping through the copper already, but yeah, this is a very, very thin piece of metal heat sink. They're hammering again next door. Anyway, we've got our 128 megabyte A-Pacer flash storage. Basic design, it's just got a little controller and a single stick of flash or chip of flash, and that's it. Nothing too special. So this little chip had actual thermal compound on it, and this one. And oddly enough, the pins were like crushed flat. So I don't know if that was a manufacturing thing or what, but it looked like they just they were like that. It's like the spring was like super strong. I don't know. I found that a little weird. Anyway, from what I can tell, this is an AMD Sempron 210U. It's so hard to find information on AMD chips when they aren't labeled properly, like just the codes. I'm sorry, you can Google every number on that and it never comes up with anything. This appears to be the North Bridge South Bridge combo. This one appears to be handling the video, so I'm going to assume it says chipset. I was thinking it might be video, but just based on the sheer number of traces running between it, I'm going to go with this is the North Bridge and this is the South Bridge, handling the interface to the Realtek, this Ethernet, probably, yeah, I'm going to go with Ethernet. We've got an IT chip here. These are usually stuff like serial and just basic functions. There's 2 serial ATA connectors on this. This is labeled as a debug board connector. Over here we've got one labeled Wi-Fi connector. Don't know if that's custom or what. I mean, it looks like it's more than 4 pins. Otherwise I'd say it's most likely just a USB interface, but I don't know. It could be supplying power. This is probably Bluetooth. That is a lot of connections. It may be serial. And BIOS chip. I'll pop that out, take a look at it. Probably nothing too interesting. And this PCI Express interface. And there's also a connector here that is either USB or maybe serial. And yeah, not too much else on this side. There's a couple unlabeled connectors. Not sure what they're doing. And we've got like a couple standoffs here that I assume this is where the Bluetooth board goes. I assume this is holding up the other end of the board. And whatever this connector does, no idea. It's not labeled. On the back, we've got another Realtek chip. It might be part of the audio, and this might be the amp for the audio. I'm not quite sure. Over here we've got a Max 8760, which is a specific chip designed for these AMD Sempron chips. And they do it. Oh, sorry, no, it's actually designed for AMD mobile Turian chips, but apparently it works with the Sempron. So I don't know. It's basically a core voltage generator for the CPU. And there's a couple oddballs here. These are probably like level shifters for the serial. And just some power supply stuff. Not too much else on this thing. It's a it's a fairly simple board. It's we're really talking basically a notebook or even a netbook. But I'll pop out this BIOS chip and take a look. Took a little while, but I got everything right off this. I had to reinstall the drivers for this thing. I updated to the Windows 10 preview, and apparently it decided to remove the drivers for this thing. No idea why, but I was able to read it. This is a whole mega flash, which is quite a bit. Yeah, nothing too interesting on it, just basic BIOS stuff. Guess that's it for this guy. I mean, there's not much to it. I was just curious what's inside one of these thin clients. I mean, I see them on eBay all the time from a whole bunch of different companies. I finally got one. This was only like $5 or something with shipping. So, yeah, I wanted to see inside. It was kind of cool. And, yeah, don't bother trying to get these for parts because they're almost always just laptop parts. And the whole point of a thin client is that they don't have a hard drive. They don't have any real amount of hardware here. It's all just minimal CPU, minimal memory, minimal storage, and it's all just coming from the server. So, even though these things are often really cheap, they're just not worth it if you want to get parts out of them. But it was interesting seeing inside one nonetheless.